Well, hello there friends. Thanks for clicking on this video and joining in on what is a fix. In the previous video I had showed this percussion rifle that I've had for nearly 10 years, never shot it. And when I shot it the other day, I talked about how rough the double set triggers were, and I'm going to fix that. For those of you that have been shooting percussion guns with double set triggers, you understand how the mechanism works. I'm just basically doing this just to help show those that may not be familiar with how double set triggers work, kind of walk through it with them so they can kind of see how the mechanism works. That may help them decide whether they want double set triggers or not if they're looking into buying a long gun with double set triggers. Just a little bit more background on the gun. When I bought the gun, it had a problem. And what the problem was is that the triggers, the set triggers, were set too deep into the channel right here. And if you can look and see, you'll see like there's some yellow epoxy stuff in there. Let me see if I can get a pointer. You can kind of see it right here and down here. Whoever put the gun together made an attempt to adjust the depth of the set triggers, because what the issue was is they were set too close right here, so that when you went to go set this, the set trigger, it was actually tripping the hammer. So basically, when you cocked the gun back, because it was resting right here, you couldn't safely cock the gun back without it going off. Now, when I was offered to purchase it, and they explained what the issue was, I knew right away what the problem was. Okay, and just as a side note, I mentioned before the lock was signed. It's actually signed by H.W. Robbins, and I'm pretty sure that you're not going to be able to see it, but it's signed in cursive right in here. I don't think you guys are going to be able to see it. Maybe that might help. But it's actually H.W. Robbins. So anyhow, I got the gun home, and all I did at first was just remove some metal right here, reharden it, just to give some clearance between the set trigger and the trip bar. Okay, that's all I done with it. Never loaded it up, never shot it. I just got the triggers working the way they were supposed to work. Okay, now the other day when I was shooting it, I talked about it being really rough. Well, what I did not know at the time is this set screw right here, and I'll show you how that works, right here on the bottom, was missing. Okay, there again, those of us that shoot these guns with double set triggers, we know how they work. We should also realize too that when it comes to these type of long guns, the front trigger will not set the gun off at full cock unless you have like a Lyman Great Plains, because my Lyman Great Plains does trip the hammer with the first and forward trigger, even though it has a double set trigger. That's just the way that lock is made. Okay, now the way this is supposed to work, okay, is when you set the rear trigger, it sets the first trigger so that when you release it, this second trigger, the set trigger, comes up and it hits the bar right here and drops the hammer. Okay, that's how that works. And if you can take a look at this, you can see how much surface there is, touching surface, between the set trigger and the trip trigger. There's actually quite a bit. So the other day when I was shooting, it felt real gritty because I'm having to move that trigger quite a ways to trip the set trigger. Okay? And I could actually feel that as I was shooting. Now, when I got the gun, like I said, I think I said this set screw was not with the gun. And again, I never bothered to shoot it because I just didn't care. Now, the way this works, when you have a screw here and you screw it up, it moves the forward trigger. If you guys can kind of watch, you can see it moving. It's kind of going up, going down, going up, going down. And of course, the deeper you put this screw, the closer to this front edge right here sets right here at the sear. Now I can tell you right now, I've got it threaded up too much. It's not even gonna, well, barely catches right there. But what that does is it makes the front trigger, I just barely touched it. That's actually too light. But see, I just barely touched it. Now, if you go up a little taller with it, it's not going to reach at all. Well, it's not going to catch. I should say it's not going to catch at all. So what you want to do is have this threaded just to the right point that you're comfortable with setting off the front trigger. See, now for some people that might be too much. For me, myself, that's about right. I would probably go just a hair more, just simply because when you're competing at a rendezvous, you don't want to be mentally waiting for the trip and the mechanism to work when when you're trying to, I don't know, let me show you something here real quick. Waiting for the gun to go off with a long set trigger. Yeah, I kind of biffed this one. And this was with my Great Plains. Okay, so anyhow, that's really the basic point to a double set trigger, is it does make the gun go off quicker, but you don't want it to go off so quick that you I don't know if this is the right choice of words, over anticipate the gun going off. So you really want to set it so that you're familiar with how much pressure you really need to put on that front trigger. And that's all adjusted with this set screw right here. Again, I showed you before how much it moves forward and back. So that way there you kind of get a feel, for when the trigger is going to go off, at what amount of pressure you put with your finger. Now, the challenge I had in looking for this screw is that it's a machine screw, and not all. And and when I say machine screw, more than likely it's a gun thread. There are different threads when it comes to some of this stuff. Okay, so when I say machine screw, don't think you're going to run to the hardware store and find a machine screw that's going to fit, because these threads might be different, but that depends on the manufacturer of, say, the trigger set or even your lock set. And when I talk about those screws, I'm talking about in particular the screws back here. You may not be able to just run down to a hardware store and replace those screws. You might. Just depends on the manufacturer. So, since my wife likes to play around with computers a lot, and she's built a couple of our home computers. She's built a computer for our son-in-law and my daughter. She tends to keep all of the screws, and she puts everything in a bag. So I was kind of fiddle-farting around with the stuff that I have in my shop, and I couldn't find anything that would thread into that hole. So I just happened to ask her if you happen to have a bag of screws that I could go through to check, and sure enough she did. And lo and behold, that screw was the only one that fit and worked. And when I say one, I mean one. Not two, not three, but one. But the problem with this screw as it sits right now, it's too big. The head of the screw is too big. It might be a little too long, but that can be overcome by sanding. So what you really want is to be able to have a screw that fits where it's supposed to be and still allow you enough room to get to the set trigger without this being in your way. And I've shot muzzle loaders before that this screw is too big, and you know, when you go around to hit that set trigger, you can literally feel that. So what you really want is to have a screw that fits precisely. It's not too tall, not too long, and if it is, well then just start sanding some of the threads on the bottom so that when you thread in the screw, it sets right at the bottom without setting the trigger and or still being able to catch it. Okay, now with all of that being said, I can tell you right now, and you probably guessed for yourself, this screw is too long, and certainly the head is too fat. So I'm going to spend some time right now shortening it up, grinding the head down. I'm going to take some of the metal, let me get this, I'm going to take some of the metal off of the head right here. But I want to keep the shoulder, because it's my intention to take this and thread it down to a stopping point, and have that trigger be just right to work. Now I understand not everybody's going to have that same, that same feel on that front trigger for double set triggers, but if I'm intending to keep this gun at this point, then I would certainly want it to fit my application and what my trigger, what my fingers feel like setting off that front trigger. Then once I get that, then I'm going to use blue Loctite and Loctite it in place so that I don't ever have to worry about it working its way out and being lost. So I'm gonna shut the camera off, work on that, and then I'll show you what the accomplishment actually is. Well, I think I got it. My original intention was to, bottom the bolt out to the bottom of the trigger plate, but I couldn't, just simply because the machine screws aren't threaded all the way to the bottom of the head of the machine screw. So this is as far as I could go with it. To get it to where I'm comfortable with it, I just had to keep sanding the bottom of where the threads are and make the threads get a little shallow so that when this stops, I'm at the point where I want to be. So just kind of observe a little bit, get you into the light here, and as you can see, I'm just right at where the trigger begins to curve. and it's pretty light. It is what it is. But if anybody, you know, purchase the gun and they want a much tighter feel to the trigger, let me get my screwdriver here. All they got to do would be to back the screw out. Just reset it, and the trigger pull is a lot tighter, heavier. So, guess I'm going to put some Loctite on it, reassemble the gun, and when it's not so windy out, run some of my homemade black powder down the barrel and shoot it through a chronograph and see what kind of numbers I can get. So thanks for watching. Bye.